But now when I get up in front of an audience, I can clearly state we have 25 years of research talking about diet, sugar sweetened beverages, ultra processed foods affecting brain function. And the effects are both attention problems, depression, anxiety, even memory and dementia. So we know clearly diet affects behavior.
Welcome to the Soaring Child Podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents. This is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child Podcast. Now, today is truly special for me personally, as I have the honor of interviewing a man who has been both an inspiration and a mentor in my own work with families of kids with ADHD. Dr. James Greenblatt. He is a groundbreaking medical expert and the best-selling author of Finally Focused. And I know a lot of my listeners have read that book themselves, and he's here today to share his invaluable wisdom on natural approaches to psychiatry. But obviously today we'll be focusing on ADHD. His work has been a beacon guiding not only professionals like myself, but also countless families towards a more sustainable and empowered way of life. He was inducted into the Orthomolecular Hall of Fame in 2017 by the International Society of Orthomolecular Medicine. He is also the founder of Psychiatry. What do you say as a psychiatry? Isn't that right? Oh my gosh, it's a tongue tie, isn't it? Psychiatry Redefined is an educational platform dedicated to the transformation of psychiatry, which offers online courses, webinars, and fellowships, which I was part of, for professionals. Now, I want everyone to prepare themselves for an eye-opening conversation that really promises to redefine your perspective on ADHD management for your child. So now it's time to welcome Dr. James Greenblatt to the Soaring Child. Hi, Dr. Greenblatt. Thank you so much for joining us.
Dana, it's great to see you, and it's good to be with you and your audience.
Well, thank you. I'm really, really grateful for you today, for you being here. I just want to, I want to dive right in because I don't want to waste any time getting to the nitty gritty. Now, I'm going to ask a little bit of a controversial question here to start. There are a lot of people out there that argue that ADHD is overdiagnosed and that medication is overly prescribed. And I'm really curious what your take is on this.
Well, I'm going to give you one of these non-answers because in some communities and for some individuals, I do think it's overdiagnosed and other problems are being missed, but it's also being underdiagnosed, particularly in women, in my experience.
Yes.
I think it's underdiagnosed in both adolescents and adults. So I've been kind of immersed in this world for 30 years. And I repeatedly see kind of overdiagnosis, anyone that can't pays attention. And there could be other causes for inattention, and underdiagnosed in other circles.
Yeah, no, you're right there. And I think that was a great answer because women generally do tend to go underdiagnosed. And so more and more are now getting diagnosed. But, back in the day, a lot of women my age are now just getting diagnosed because it was missed because of those sort of quiet symptoms. So I appreciate your answer to that, to open up that different discussion. What are some of the limitations of medication management for ADHD?
Well, I mean, the most powerful limitation, it's just a symptomatic Band-Aid. It doesn't do anything to the underlying symptoms. And when someone takes the medication, there might be an improvement. As soon as the medicine wears off, and these are short-acting medicines, the symptoms come back. And so that's the most concerning. And then for many kids and adults, it's side effects. Yeah. The medications that are used are amphetamines, and there are a kind of wide list of potential side effects.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. And that's exactly, what happened with my son many years ago. And He ended up being on 3 strong medications, and the doctor wanted to put him on the 4th. And so totally can understand all of the side effects that come with it. But I'm curious, Dr. Greenblatt, what actually got you interested in the sort of more natural approach?
Well, I went to medical school very focused on, diet curing all of the ills of mankind. And then, I came out 9 years later, a child psychiatrist, writing prescriptions.
Yeah.
And it only took me a year in private practice, where most of what I was seeing at that time was ADHD, to realize the limitations of medications. So I got back to kind of the roots, the reason I went into medical school and started looking and researching and kind of accumulating the research that was done on nutritional and more natural approaches to ADHD.
That's interesting, actually, that you started out going into medical school with diet as a view that is a treatment. What put that in your mind right from word go?
It was just, a book I picked up here or a course I took here in college. It was just always an interest of mine. And I did papers on college on nutrition and mental illness.
Oh, that's
So
amazing. So
never
you
thought
are
of it as
truly
a
a
career.
pioneer. You're truly a pioneer, because back in the day, that probably, it's much more mainstream now, but back in the day, it probably wasn't at all.
No, it certainly wasn't clinically integrated into a medical practice. There was research. I mean, we can go back hundreds of years looking at nutritional
Hmm.
deficiencies affecting health and particularly brain health, but there was not a very significant clinical practice of medicine that really was geared towards nutritional interventions.
Yeah, definitely. So look, here is some food for thought, literally. Why don't you spill the beans on how diet and nutrition play pivotal roles in really curbing ADHD symptoms in children?
Sure. When I first started talking about this in I remember 1990s, 93, I gave this presentation, and I just remember vividly talking about sugar and how it affects behavior. But I had to say there was no research to support it, even though everybody in the room, might have had an association with their children, but the few research didn't support it. But now, when I get up in front of an audience, I can clearly state we have 25 years of research talking about diet, sugar sweetened beverages, ultra processed foods affecting brain function. And the effects are both attention problems, depression, anxiety, even memory and dementia. So we know clearly diet affects behavior. I think of ADHD as a kind of genetic neurobiological illness, and these dietary patterns that many that are nutrient deficient will exacerbate the symptoms.
100%. And so, sugar, the amount of sugar that we consume in our diets these days is just, I don't think we can even count. I think I read a study a couple of weeks ago. It said something like the average American is consuming 150 to 180 pounds of sugar a year. And you just think about that and just, I mean, if that affects us as adults, what it's doing to our child's body, what it's doing to their child's brain. How do you think, I always think to myself, how did we get so far away from where we started? Why is this all started? Everything's got sugar in it these days. And coming from Australia, it's really interesting because, yes, we have a lot of packaged foods in Australia, but things like bread and doesn't have sugar in it. But here, when I moved to the US and I picked up a loaf of bread, it's got sugar in it. And so I'm just interested in your thought. How do you think we just move so far away from like natural, whole, healthy foods?
I think it's usually driven by money and profit. And I think the food industry, needs to sell more products, and sugar sells. There are products, the exact same product, usually a processed food that might have 10 or 20 ingredients, in the UK, And the United States, it might have 40 ingredients
Mhm.
because there are some additives that aren't allowed in Europe, but here in the States you can put it. So I think it's the food industry selling products, and it results in health problems from diabetes to, in my world, mental health challenges for a number of individuals. Not everyone, and that's the hard part that people don't understand. There are going to be kids that can eat the sugar and not have behavior problems. There are other kids that are going to be, it's hard to regulate their blood sugar, and the nutrient deficiencies related to eating too much sugar will result in significant behavioral or emotional problems.
Definitely. So we've talked about sugar. We know that, that is a big component for most children, I would say. What are some of the other, nutritional changes that you sort of advocate for children with ADHD?
Well, I mean, related to sugar is the B vitamins,
Hmm.
because I mean, sugar um, is being given to our kids without nutrients to process it. So, to metabolize the sugar in the body, for the body to utilize it, it's going to need B vitamins. So, it's going to take them. And so, B vitamin deficiencies are common. We say B is for a better brain, and there are just many, many reactions that require these B vitamins. So, that's a common nutritional deficiency.
And what are your thoughts on artificial flavors and artificial colors?
Again, when I started, there was the Feingold movement, and people
Hmm.
tried to say that affects everyone with ADHD. Eliminate these, and you'll cure your child. Well, there was actually enough research done to demonstrate no, it's not every child with ADHD, but there is a percentage of kids that have this genetic variant where, yes, the food additives and the dyes and these colors affect behavior, sometimes dramatically. So, what we can say is your child might be sensitive, and certainly these young children, it is worth the effort of taking 3 months to see and eliminate all these food additives and dyes and colors as best you can. You might notice a significant improvement in behavior.
Yeah, with working with the number of kids that I have and their families in reducing ADHD symptoms, there's some that I have seen that even just the smallest ounce of any artificial dye sends them into a complete tailspin. And they're like a different child. And so I definitely presume those are the type of kids that have that underlying genetics. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at artificial flavors and colors, like most of them are derived from things like petroleum and can have upwards of 100 different ingredients in artificial flavors. And, the food industry can just slap that on the label and we don't even know what we're eating. So, doing a trial for 3 months not only, will tell you whether or not your kid is really affected by that, but also it's probably better for health at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And it is hard, especially with the amount of sugar and candy our kids have got access to. Now, before we I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into nutritional deficiencies. You've talked about some of those B vitamin deficiencies. What other sort of specific nutritional deficiencies do you find common with kids with ADHD?
Probably the most common deficiency, both in children and adults, is the trace mineral magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some research in international journals, and my clinical experience is, I would say, 99%. So we'll just call it 100% of those individuals that I've seen with ADHD are magnesium deficient and benefit from the trace mineral magnesium.
Definitely, because I talk a lot about, isn't it used for like over 300 biochemical processes in the body?
Yeah, I mean, it's common. It's used in the brain. It's used throughout the body, and it's deficient in our diets. Even if you eat a whole food diet, it's deficient in our soil and stress. And many of our kids and adults with ADHD, like all of us, struggle with coping with that stress. And stress causes a depletion of magnesium. So there
Mm-hmm.
are many factors that result in a magnesium deficiency, and it's one of the simplest interventions that I think parents can do and learn about and help their children.
Definitely. I'm curious what your thoughts are on just year-round supplementation of magnesium. I mean, are you one to sort of say, oh, do 3 months on, 3 months off? Or, because there is such a deficiency, not only in our children with ADHD, but probably for most of the population of the US, what's your approach in, maintaining that sort of magnesium on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the root of my practice in the books is all about testing and a
Yep.
kind of personalized approach. But I think there are a few nutrients that we could give our kids without testing, and that would probably be the B complex I mentioned, magnesium, and essential fatty acids.
Mm-hmm.
So magnesium could be instituted by parents. There are symptoms of magnesium deficiency, like poor sleep,
Mm-hmm.
irritability, constipation, anxiety. So, if anyone has any of those symptoms, then magnesium supplementation would help. And I have no problem using, long-term magnesium therapy because I think most people will benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely. And so if we sort of go to the supplements, the supplement aisle can be really, really overwhelming for parents. Do you advocate for children to take nutritional supplements? And so you've talked about a couple that you think are a no-brainer, being magnesium, omega-3 fatty acids, and B complex. What's your take on children taking other nutritional supplements?
In addition to those, I think it should be based on some assessment,
Yes.
some testing, because we find many kids who are deficient in zinc.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to understand that before we supplement a child. We have many other deficiencies as B12, vitamin D, and other problems, as you know, related to gut health.
Yep.
So, ideally, testing so we can really understand what's going on and then personalize a treatment approach based on those tests.
Yeah, definitely. Test, don't guess is is what I say. So curious, what are your favorite tests for kids with ADHD? I mean, I know the answer, but I want to share. I want to share it with our listeners today.
Sure. I mean, I think there's a long list, but I think there are a few that are really important. One is a trace mineral hair test where we can look at elevations of copper and low zinc. Another test is called organic acid, which helps us look at kind of gut health problems. And another test would be what's called a cryptopyrrole test. It looks at a genetic disorder of um, resulting in B6 and zinc deficiency. So those are some of the core tests. And depending on the severity of symptoms, there are other tests we'd want to do. We're always looking at iron deficiency, B12, and vitamin D is just too common, particularly in our darker skin patients where it's harder to absorb vitamin D from the sun.
Yeah, definitely. And for those that live in places like Seattle, where it rains a lot, just like myself. So I definitely take a vitamin D supplementation year round. The other thing is there, which I know that you know all about, which we'll dive into in a second, but there are a couple of genetics that will predispose you to vitamin D deficiency because of the way that you actually process the vitamin D and convert it to its activated source and then transport that vitamin D to the cell and then the way that it is absorbed into the cell. And so when you have someone that is compromised in that area, it's even more so that they'll be deficient. So taking a regular supplementation. Curious on your thoughts on what the ideal range of vitamin D based on a lab test that you like to see.
Yeah, everyone's got a different number. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that, we try to get the numbers above 40, so 40
Yes.
to 60 are the
Yes.
ranges that we've kind of
Yeah.
settled on. There are people advocating for much higher doses for, autoimmune disorders, but I
Hmm.
think for ADHD in kids or adults, anything above 40 means that both calcium is being absorbed and the rest of the dramatic functions of vitamin D on every cell in the body can usually be moderated sufficiently.
Yeah, definitely. That's usually where I like to land as well. Now, I talked a little bit about genetics. How does genetics sort of come into play when you're devising a personalized treatment plan for ADHD?
Again, it's part of that list of more tests if people can do it, because there are a few markers that help us understand one, how someone might metabolize medications
Mm-hmm.
if someone's using medicine. Two, a vulnerability to nutritional deficiencies like some of the B vitamins, as well as what you described, how vitamin D is more optimized. So nutritional um, deficiencies related to genetic testing is not uncommon, and it really just enhances the treatment.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts around methylation?
Well, I think methylation is a critical chemical reaction, and some people have different responses to that process. So there are certain genes that we can look at, like the MTHFR gene, that can help us determine the needs for one of the prime methylators, folate, in the body. So it has a really important role. I think sometimes the internet, overhypes words like methylation and inflammation, but with a qualified clinician who can help you understand it and see if it's a problem, it should be addressed. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I think that MTHFR genetic mutation is like the poster child of the methylation cycle, just because it is sort of yelled from the rooftops, especially when it comes to sort of autism and things like that. But there are a number of other underlying genes that will affect methylation that generally get missed and don't get talked about. And I think that is really critical to look at, because just because you've got a part mutation in one of the MTHFR genes that's not even the stronger one doesn't mean that your overall methylation cycle is going to be compromised. So really working with someone that understands that is super critical to a proper plan. Now, in terms of detoxification, I don't think I've heard you talk a lot about it. Maybe it's just the stuff that I've been listening to, but I'd love to know your thoughts around helping our kids detox. Optimizing their liver and their kidneys, because we are exposed to so many toxins in this world that's contributing to inflammation, buzzword. And so I'm curious on your approach around that.
Yeah, I think our approach, because people end up getting to a child psychiatrist when there's pretty significant symptoms. So what we're trying to help parents do is look for the underlying cause that might be blocking up those pathways. So we'll look for heavy metals like mercury and lead. We'll look for copper. We'll look for products of dysbiosis like yeast and Clostridia, which will affect the detoxification pathways. So that would be kind of our approach, seeing very symptomatic patients that need relief.
Yeah, look, you mentioned Clostridia, and it's really, I do see it probably in about 50% of the kids that I work with. For the listeners, can you just explain a little bit about Clostridia and what it sort of does and how that's so common in kids with ADHD and mental health disorders?
Sure. I mean, we have pounds of bacteria in our gut that symbiotically live a happy life and help us, and we help them. And Clostridia is one strain, and or one type, and there might be 100 different strains of Clostridia. Some are dangerous and produce significant medical complications, but there are some strains that produce chemicals that can affect brain function in humans. And we can't detect the particular bacteria as easily as we can detect the metabolites. So it's a urine test where we look at a metabolite of Clostridia in the gut. And if it's positive, we've just seen for 25 years, it has significant effects on brain function. And these are typically the irritable, anxious, angry kids or adults. And if we treat it, sometimes with just probiotics, occasionally antibiotics, then there's pretty significant resolution of symptoms.
Yeah, definitely. I actually like sort of do a little happy dance every time I see it, especially when you've got a kid who has that really emotional dysregulation, because you know that like just bringing in some, Saccharomyces boulardii type of probiotics can really, really help that child and, in turn help that whole family. Look, Dr. Greenblatt, I love everything that you talk about. I love your approach. I am 100% into it all, but I'm wondering how you respond to critics who say natural methods are nothing more than pseudoscience.
In the old days, I didn't have a lot other than I just knew in my heart kids got better.
Yeah.
But at this point, we have research to support everything that you and I and many others have been trying to say to parents and families. So, and oftentimes I have more research than we have on some of the pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty easy to be able to talk to colleagues or other professionals to just say, wait a minute, here's the science. And I think that's been the exciting part of the past 5 years of continuing this work. And hopefully, just more research will support more clinicians utilizing a more natural approach to ADHD and other psychiatric illnesses.
Yeah, it is. It's very much a battle of the scientific studies. And I read a statistic the other day that said that pharmaceutical industry spends 5 times more on marketing than they do on research. And I was blown away by that because, they're marketing these drugs that can have sometimes toxic effect to people. Look, I'm not against medication. There's definitely a time and place for it. But some of these tactics that these companies are using, but also they're the ones that are funding a lot of the studies. There's not much profit in getting people well, is there, at the end of the day? And I know that you probably can't talk about it and engage in a conversation like this, but
And no, we do it all the time. It's quite clear. You go to a psychiatry conference, it's supported and funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And as you said, the research is as well. So it is a kind of a catch-22. And, but, I think patients are demanding different care. Clinicians are interested in it. So I've been optimistic that the tide has shifted and more clinicians are looking for the education to be able to help patients.
Definitely. And, the more that we can spread that word and show families and people and doctors out there that, this helps. I mean, my son is the perfect example of that. He was diagnosed when he was 4. He was on 3 meds by the time he was 5. The doctor wanted him on the 4th med. He's now 14. He hasn't been on meds for years. He is thriving. He's a straight A student, but that doesn't matter to me. The most important thing is he's happy. And that is a perfect case study to say that, natural methods work. And I've worked now with over 1,000 other families and, they all see results. So it's not just pseudoscience. And I can just show you by the case studies that it's not. Unfortunately, I don't have the same type of funds that the pharmaceutical company has to be able to actually fund any proper studies on it. Well, Dr. Greenblatt, this has been an absolute pleasure having you here today. One of my career highlights, honestly. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. Just before we finish up, if you could say to families out there that are really struggling with kids with ADHD, what's something that they can do today to really start this journey?
Maybe the most important thing is to listen to your child. So our kids with ADHD know what is helpful and they'll tell you, and listening to your children and then, kind of understanding that there is a very clear path towards a more natural approach. And it doesn't mean medications are the enemy. It just means that look and try to find someone who can help you with the testing, because with that testing, you'll be able to determine a path to provide that kind of relief for your child who is and might be struggling.
Well said. As I like to say, is symptoms are a warning sign from the body that something else is going on. And, it's our job as parents to look deep into seeing what is driving those symptoms. So our kids are definitely the biggest picture into what is going on inside their body. Well, Dr. Greenblatt, thank you once again. Can you please tell listeners where they can find and follow you online?
Sure. The jamesgreenblattmd.com is where we have our website and books. And for any of the courses is psychiatryredefined.org.
Fabulous. Thank you once again for joining me. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kate, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at ADHDthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.